Hey guys, this is M, and in this video I'm going to talk about most common mistakes people make with Vengeful Spirit. And when I say people, I mean players around and below 3k. And heads up, the most common mistake is to do with her ult. Let's just quickly see one example to start things off with. Right there. Let's analyze the situation. The techies is stunned, the Death Prophet, your core, is coming in to lay the damage, silence and whatnot, and then you swap. What's the purpose of that swap? Doesn't really achieve anything. All it does is repositions techies to be a little bit closer to the Death Prophet, which, if it was a melee core that you had, would have been really, really fantastic. But in this situation, the Death Prophet doesn't need that hero to be closer. In fact, if the hero is stunned and in one place, Death Prophet is going to be quite easily able to silence that person. And I know this because this Death Prophet is me, and I was really, really surprised by that swap. And the thing is, when you swap like this, when it's unexpected, when it's not required, what you actually end up doing is you actually end up harming your own team. You stun your allies because they're just standing there going like, What just happened?" You know? So it's a really, really bad idea to use swap inefficiently or when it's not required. Now there are two obviously ways to use swap: offensively and defensively. And this is what brings me to the question: why did I pick Venji for this video? Why do I like Venji? I think Vengeful Spirit is a really, really fantastic support for people below 3.5k MMR. The reason for that is because Venji is an extremely versatile support. You can first pick her, there are no counters to Vengeful Spirit, and she fits in almost every single lineup. Now, before we continue on to more advantages, let's look at another example of swap being used poorly. Right here, we have an example of Tidehunter using Ravage, an excellent Ravage, and then swap being used for, once again, no reason at all. Now, the trick here is to consider Venji's swap as just like you would Tidehunter's Ravage or Enigma's Black Hole. What I mean is a really, really, really long cooldown spell, and you use it just like a precious resource. And if you look at the cooldown on this spell, it's a 45-second cooldown spell. So in any given team fight, you're only going to use it once, for sure, right? So you have to treat it like a very, very long cooldown spell. Because what happens is a later situation may develop just like right now, where you would need to use swap and you've already used it and you don't have swap. Because right now, the two of your cores are in a very, very bad situation, and you could have swapped and saved them, one of them at least, but you didn't, and ended up being really bad for them. They took a lot of unnecessary damage. Now, coming back to the benefits of Vinci, as I said, she fits around every single lineup. She is one of the biggest benefits is that she is a very, very scaling sort of a hero. She scales really, really well. If you have the right item build, if medallion, and then turn it into a solar crest, all of a sudden you and your allies are hitting really, really hard. You can make force staff. You start making really, really awesome plays, obviously, if you're using Flop properly. And also, she is one of the few supports who can be used offensively as well as defensively, depending on the situation, depending on the game. What you want to consider before you start thinking of Benji as an offensive or a defensive support is what is your team lineup? In particular, what is your second support? If you have a second support, that is. If you don't have a second support, definitely, if you're a solo support, you want to be playing Dimension defensively. But if you have a second support, then you have to ask yourself: is that second support, is he an offensive hero or a defensive hero? For example, the Rasta is a completely offensive hero. There are no defensive spells that Rasta. Before we carry on with that, once again, this is another swap which is used quite poorly. The reason why this is a poor swap is because there is no way you could have killed this hero, right? You don't have your damaging cores. So once again, you use swap, and later on, you're not going to be able to use swap. Of course, you died, but if you were alive, you wouldn't have been able to use swap. And of course, the Slark didn't die because that hero, you couldn't have killed him anyway, right? So coming back, you ask yourself, is my second support an offensive hero or a defensive hero. If it's a defensive hero, then you play Benji offensively. You build offensive items. You build, Solar Crest. You build some damage items. You have a mentality that you're going to swap people offensively, the way this particular Benji has been doing so far. And this Benji has the mentality of playing Vengeful Spirit as an offensive hero almost purely. That's probably what this player does exclusively. But in this game, you need to be playing Benji as a defensive hero. And here we see an example of defensiveness not even being in the mind of this person, because he is around this time he's thinking, he's coming in, he's running in thinking, who do I swap, and suddenly he sees an ally who is way too low and he swaps him. And this is the thing, this person is not thinking defensively at all. And look at the swap distance. This is like might as well not have even happened. So this is where what you are thinking, what your intentions are beforehand, before going into a fight. When the game is starting, you need to be thinking, am I going into this game, am I going into this team fight thinking that I'm an offensive hero or a defensive hero, support or a defensive support. So this is the way you want to play. When you play a defensive Benji or defensive support, essentially, you want to make sure that your positioning is as far from a team fight as humanly possible. Of course, you want to make sure that you're close enough to be able to use your spells, but far enough to not get picked off and die. And in this particular case, when you're a Benji, you want to make sure you're just at the edge of the range of swap so that you just move a few steps closer and then you swap. Of course, if you're playing a defensive Benji. Now here we have another example pretty soon of swap being used quite poorly. Right here, actually I went too fast and I forwarded. Once again, as we said earlier, this Vengeful Spirit is not at all used to playing defensively. So he's coming in, he's thinking, I need to save my Death Prophet. I hope he's thinking that, but he doesn't swap the Death Prophet. If he'd swapped the Death Prophet would have lived here. And he may have lived, I don't know, he probably would have still died. But it would have been a really, really good swap. But it ended up being... Let's see another example really, really quickly of swap being used poorly. Right here. This guy, he's gonna die. Uh, First of all, he's gonna die. He's being frost arrowed, he's being chased, he's been slowed, the works. Now, the second thing is he's a really, really low priority target. And when you swap him, once again, later on, you will not have swap for 45 seconds. If a team fight breaks out, suddenly you don't have swap. Right here, if you swap this Death Prophet, your core things would have been much, much different. On top of that, when you make poor decisions like using your really high cooldown spells or using your spells improperly, you force your other allies to make big mistakes. Like this Tidehunter using Ravage purely to save his core and used Ravage on one person, and the team fight just went horribly from there. And a lot of that is on your shoulders, on the swap being used poorly. Now, I'm not going to say the Tidehunter did the right thing, but I am going to say that because of your poor usage of swap, the Tidehunter felt forced to make. Once again, we're going to see a quick example of essentially the same thing. You want to use swap at the maximum range, so you want to make sure you don't keep coming closer and closer. Like, what is this range? This is not a good range of swap. At this point, you shouldn't even be swapping, essentially. So make sure that you use your swap most efficiently. And one more example we're going to see of swap actually being used really, really amazingly, and that's right here. See, this is amazing. This is an amazing swap. You 100% guaranteed saved your ally from certain death, and you maximum range swapped him, and you lived, your ally lived, and everything is fantastic. So, in summary, I think Vengeful Spirit is a fantastic support for lower MMR brackets, very versatile hero. Learn to play as both an offensive support and a defensive support, and make sure to use swap as a very, very valuable resource. Wait for the most opportune time to use swap. If you don't have defensive supports, then wait to use swap defensively. And if you don't have offensive supports, then try to use your swap to get a enemy hero out of position and into right dead center into your allies. What I like to do when I play offensive NG is once I have force staff, and usually by that time my swap is at the very least level 2, what I like to do is I like to throw out a Wave of Terror, make sure I see an enemy hero who is high priority target and who doesn't have escape. For example, I wouldn't swap a Slark, I wouldn't swap an Ember Spirit. I would, however, swap most likely a Techies or a Ogre or even a Pudge, most likely. Probably not a Pudge because by the time my team kills him, their team is going to engage and it's going to be horrible for me. So most likely Techies and Ogre in this example are going to be the best swap targets. So I swap them and I immediately force staff myself out. And even if I'm not able to force staff myself out and I die, it's completely fine because their high priority target has died. I have died, yes, but I've suddenly given my vengeance aura to them, and now the entire enemy team has lower damage. So the next team fight, which is going to be a 4v4, is going to be, my team is just going to be missing one support, whereas their team is going to be missing the core, and they're going to be lower in damage. So they're 100%. I'm setting up my team to win. I hope I made a strong case for Benji. I hope I've explained how to use her ult, and I hope that you take a lot of information away from this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.